Why? Why, God, why? We were doing so well. Everything was improving. DC was finally getting on track. But here comes Mr. Obi-Wan Kenobi like,
Hello there.
and destroys all the goodwill that was building up.
Zombie apocalypse.
Birds of Prey. Now, I don't normally make videos about movies that haven't come out yet, and this technically isn't a lousy review. However, I do want to talk about this movie that's coming out this week and the DCEU as a whole as it is so far. Now, like I've stated in one of my previous videos, I don't like talking about politics on the channel. There's a reason for that. The reason why is because I am not a political channel. Therefore, I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to bring it up in any way, because I believe that it's a very dividing thing to bring up, especially when you're trying to form a community on YouTube. However, in that same video, I also stated that there are certain movies that have politics infused with them, and it needs to be addressed. Obviously, if the movie itself is based on politics, like that movie that came out not so long ago, Chappaquiddick, I'm not really going to worry about it. I mean, after all, the entire point of that movie is to be political. However, there are some movies, mostly the superhero movies that have been coming out every year, that don't require political messaging and is only there to seems like to push a political agenda. And Birds of Prey, unfortunately, seem to be a part of the latter. Now, basically, this Birds of Prey movie looks like it's all about how Harley Quinn takes down Black Mask. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, Black Mask is a notorious gangster whose real name is Roman Sionis, and is played by Obi-Wan Kenobi himself, Ewan McGregor. Roman's one of the biggest crime lords of Gotham, and he has been in several animated movies such as Batman Under the Red Hood and Batman Bad Blood. He's even had his own short appearance in the Batman Arkham Origins game, inevitably before his spot was taken by Joker as lead antagonist. He isn't really one of Batman's main villains, more as a side villain most of the time, so it makes sense that he's not really going up against a big bad himself, but against other villains that plague Gotham. The plot also seems to revolve around the fact that Harley Quinn is teaming up with other female DC characters such as Renee Montoya, a Gotham City Police Department detective played by Rosie Perez. Montoya, who had worked for the GCPD, resigned from the force after she was exposed as a lesbian. Okay then. And in the comics has run into and helped Batman on more than one occasion. Harley and Montoya will also be teaming up with the Huntress, a superhero who is most popular as two different women, Helena Bertinelli and Helena Wayne, but I believe that the movie's timeline is going to be going with Bertinelli instead of the Wayne. Bertinelli's Huntress is played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead and was the daughter of one of Gotham's crime lords. One day, she witnesses her entire family get taken out in a mob hit, and she vows revenge, much like Batman's Bruce Wayne. In the comics, Batman believed her to be too unpredictable and violent at first, but Huntress not only worked with Batman from time to time, she also had a brief romantic fling with Nightwing. Two more left, with one of them being Cassandra Cain, played by Alea J. Pascoe. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And in the comics, she's the daughter of Lady Shiva, one of the world's best assassins. Deprived of speech and human contact at a young age, Cassandra grew up to be an expert martial artist while remaining mute. I'm interested to see if they stick to this, and if so, how the actress can keep from fading into the background with this character. The last of the group is Black Canary, played by Janice Smollett Bell. Hopefully I'm pronouncing her name correctly as well. And besides Harley Quinn, she may be the most well-known of the group of ladies. Black Canary was one of DC's first fighting heroines and became an expert martial artist and hand-to-hand combatant. She also has one of DC's most distinctive superpowers, the Canary Cry, a supersonic scream that could break objects and could incapacitate or even kill her foes with enough exposure. Now, as a general rule, I hate when companies or directors race or gender swap any character because they are already established characters. I don't believe that it adds anything to the story that's worthwhile and is only there to seem like it, to make this movie seem more progressive. Plus, we all know it's only one way. Hollywood would never make a Static Shock movie starring Tom Holland, and nor should they. By the way, I'm also still waiting for a Static Shock movie. That show was really good as a kid, and it was so fun and had such creative villains. Now, for me personally, I didn't really see anything wrong with the trailer. I mean, they didn't seem that bad to me. I do like the look of the aesthetic and hope that the most of this garbage political marketing is just that, marketing. I have heard that the movie is decent from channels that claim that they know people that watch the movie, but it's hard to take third-party claims so seriously and therefore have to judge just by myself. most of the story that people are talking about comes from the director McGregor himself. He's talking about how this movie is supposed to tackle misogyny and what women have to go through on a daily basis. I mean, it's really pathetic. We know it's terrible to be a misogynist, and no decent man harasses women on a daily basis. This just seems like pandering from McGregor, and whether he knows it or not, it's dividing the group of people who might actually go see this movie. I also wanted to talk how this movie is going to impact the DCEU as a whole. Now, first things first, I want to get my biases out in the open so I can be honest with the people who watch this video. I'm a DC over Marvel kind of guy, so when I talk about the DCEU, just make sure you take what I say with a grain of salt. I try to leave my biases at the door when talking about this, but I know that it may and will creep its way into my points eventually, so just a heads up now. You have been warned. Also, please comment if you want me to do any lousy reviews on any or all of these movies that I'm about to talk about. Thank you. The DCEU, or DC Extended Universe, is the unofficial term that the community at large has given to the American media franchise and shared universe that focuses on the characters of DC Comics, and that has also been distributed by Warner Brothers. Now, the DCEU was officially started with the movie called Man of Steel, which was an origin story of Superman played by Henry Cavill, or Geralt of Rivia as he is now going by. Man of Steel was directed by Zack Snyder, who would go on to direct 3 of the now 8 movies about in the DCEU. The other 2 being Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice and Justice League, but we'll get to them a bit later. Man of Steel was released on June 14th, 2013, and focused on Superman and Zod, a Kryptonian general obsessed with building a new homeworld after his was destroyed. The movie was a bit of a divide, with almost half the community hating the movie while the other half loved it. For me, I fall somewhere in the middle. It was something never really seen before in terms of a Superman movie, and it definitely had a lot of cool things about it, one of which being Zod's badass theme music. However, the movie also has its fair share of criticism and wasn't the best start of the extended universe that the DC fans had hoped for. After Man of Steel comes Zack Snyder's Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And this is where I'm going to start having the unpopular opinion here. I actually really enjoyed this movie. Now wait. Let me explain. The movie is, of course, no means perfect, but some people want to say that it's terrible in every way, and that I just can't agree on. Again, this might be the DC fanboy inside me, but I don't think this movie is a 28% on Rotten Tomatoes that, the critics claim it to be. In fact, I think the 63% audience score sounds like a more accurate number. Now, the movie was released on March 25th, 2016, and I will be speaking of the theatrical cut as well. By the way, yes, this movie has a lot of things wrong with it. The plot is so complicated that it takes multiple viewings to actually, make sense of any of it. The movie looked like it was trying to rush out a Justice League movie, and it probably pretty much was. And the whole Martha scene was a clear example of how a good idea can be so poorly executed, it becomes a meme. However, the movie does have some pretty good things. It has a wicked fight scene between the Man of Steel and the Dark Knight, even if you have to wait 2.5 hours before you can actually see it, and it's only 8 minutes long. It's got an even better Batman fight scene in the warehouse that has never been performed on the big screen before, and it introduces us to the hottest woman on the planet and permanent fix of live-action Wonder Woman for me, Gal Gadot. This movie was seen as one of the great failures of the DCEU, but with enough time, I believe it will get the praise it deserves, along with the criticism. Now, this next installment, pretty much everyone agrees that it's just bad. Now, the next installment of the franchise was Suicide Squad. It was released in August 5th, 2016, and was written and directed by David Ayer. I believe I'm pronouncing that name correctly. I hope I am. Now, Suicide Squad was considered the worst of the DCEU, and has been so far. And as much as I didn't really personally have a problem with the movie itself, I have to agree. A lot of people hated this movie, and I believe it's mainly because of Jared Leto's portrayal as the Joker. I am of the small community that actually wished we could have seen more of, Jared's performance, and if I remember correctly, I believe it was like 90% of his footage was cut out when the movie first was released. I mean, Leto's performance comes after a still fresh in everybody's mind performance by Heath Ledger, and that was considered one of, if not the best, live-action performance of the character. Now, I was hoping he could reprise his role in the upcoming Birds of Prey movie and expand on what we were given in Suicide Squad, but by the looks of it, I don't think that will happen. Now, Suicide Squad is kind of one of those turn your brains off kinds of movies to actually enjoy. But I mean, if you really didn't enjoy this movie and you absolutely find it abhorrent, I mean, I can see why. It still has a pretty good trailer if you ask me. Now back to the hottest woman in cinema. Wonder Woman stars Gal Gadot and was released on June 2nd, 2017. The movie was directed by Patty Jenkins and is by, critic standard the best movie that the DCEU has made. I'm not one to usually agree with the critics, but I do have to agree with them on this one. Wonder Woman is a great movie with great action scenes and great storytelling. The journey that Diana goes on to learn about humanity and herself is very powerful, and Godot really sells her role as an Amazonian princess. I think the No Man's Land scene is one of the greatest superhero moments in both the DCEU and the MCU to date. The movie itself really tackles humanity as a whole, not just shoving male hatred in your face of the viewer. And it really shows us that we could all be better people and should always strive to be better people. The only problem I really had with the movie is its third act and how they portray Greek mythology. But I mean, there was no doubt that this movie was definitely the boost that DC needed to begin its takeoff. Then came the day of November 17th, 2017, and the DCEU hit another patch, according to the community. Justice League was another one of those movies where people were divided when it first came out. One thing I always enjoyed about Zack Snyder's DC movies were how connected they felt. It may have been just the way it was shot or whatever, but it had this feeling of familiarity about them. It was a strange sensation I felt when seeing the giant black and silver Superman, draped across one of the giant bridges in the city. Or maybe it was the establishing shots of the city. It just felt like the transition from March 2016 to November 2017 wasn't really there. It just felt like it continually flowed. I don't know. It felt like I was continually going off of Dawn of Justice and not just really starting another movie. Then again, it might just be me. The movie was all about the founding members of the Justice League, the joining of the universe's greatest warriors and defenders. The biggest three being Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman. The movie itself had its problems, the main one being the villain Steppenwolf. It was a bit of a stumble, but it wasn't the worst thing that happened to the DCEU. Luckily for the DCEU, the next two movies were highly more praised. Next up was every woman's mermaid fantasy. Jason Momoa takes the mantle of lead character in this next movie. Now, Aquaman, when it first came out, was actually a bit of a gamble. Before the DCEU, Aquaman was always seen as that character that no one ever really took seriously. He was always the, you talk to fish? What else do you do? That's it? Okay. He was never really taken seriously. Aside from his new look in both Justice League and his brief appearance in Dawn of Justice, he didn't really get that much screen time. But this movie, I loved this movie. It wasn't as good as Wonder Woman, but it was still pretty good. It had everything that Wonder Woman did well in it. The camera work in this movie was phenomenal. The fight scenes were great. You had great action, great scope. You could see where everyone was in accordance to each other. It was just great overall. Like the camera work in like James Wan, who directed this movie, did awesome. Patrick Wilson as Aquaman's brother was actually a very great surprise. And I'm sitting here, I remember when I first watched the trailer, I'm just like, okay, it's underwater Eminem. But no, Patrick Wilson he did a really great job as Ocean Master. But what really stole the movie for me was Black Manta. Now, and I know I'm going to get this wrong, but Black Manta was played by Yahal Abdul Manti. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Yahal Abdul Manti II. I don't know. He did so good in his revenge role for his father that it actually made me upset because one of the biggest things about Aquaman is it just feels like it's 20 minutes too late or too long, and that if you would have cut all the Manta stuff out, you would have just left the brief appearance of the beginning to plant the seed and bring him back in for the sequel. He would have been a lot more intimidating, and it would have made a great villain, all the more greater if you actually waited for him, in my opinion, at least. Growing up, did you ever want to have superpowers? Did you ever want to be Superman? To be able to leap tall buildings in a single bound? To be as powerful as a locomotive? I mean, the latest movie of the DCEU, besides The Birds of Prey, really showed us a great example of how that story could be shown. On April 5th, 2019, the origin of the original Captain Marvel, hashtag fight me, Shazam, appeared. Both Zachary Levi and Asher Angel both plays the character of Billy Batson, a troubled youth that struggles to find his mother and find a home for himself, and that is soon bestowed upon godlike powers from an ancient wizard in order to defeat the ancient seven deadly sins. Now, as much as that premise actually seems like a very plot-driven movie, this movie is actually very character-driven and revolves around the idea of family. My biggest complaint with the movie is that it treats the entire seven deadly sins as a single entity. Now, I for one love the stories that can create with the seven deadly sins, whether it was the latest Darksiders 3 game or what I was hoping the movie would go is more of the Full Metal Alchemist route, but sadly it doesn't. However, like Wonder Woman and Aquaman, it was a huge hit and gave the DCEU a lot of praise. Now, I mention all this because it's had its stumbles, but especially with the later installments, the DCEU has been constantly kind of going up in an upwards trajectory, if you ask me. The stock market prices have been going up, and this all leads to the Birds of Prey. And although I am very interested to see what this movie can come up with, I don't have the greatest expectations with what we've seen so far. Now, whether you like this whole woke culture, entering movies or not, we should all be hoping that, politics stays out of the media as much as we can, as much as we watch. If we can't have common places, then we can't, if we don't have common places that we can't enjoy altogether, even if we disagree on political issues, then we can't tolerate each other. And if we can't do that, then we're seriously going down a dark path. I really hope this movie does well. As a DC fan, I really hope that it doesn't backtrack on the goodwill that the DCEU has been building up. But from all that I've seen, it seems like it's going to be a stumble. I hope that's not the case. I really do. I'm going to save judgment until I actually go see it this weekend, but I don't have the biggest expectations for it. Anyway, that's going to be today's video, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, especially subscribe. And while you're at it, leave me a comment telling me which DCEU movie was your favorite. Or, if you hate all of them, that's a possibility, then tell me what the DCEU would have to do at this point in order to actually fix itself, or if it's beyond saving at this point. And do you think the new movies are going to get better or worse as time goes on? Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later.